do here. So, all right, here is the situation. So we've done the coaching program a number of times. It went well, but there are a few things that we think can be improved. The biggest areas where people saw an opportunity for improvement are, one, timeliness. So basically getting things done on time and schedule, and especially last semester we were late with that. There were a few things that were stacked against us, like for example, Tim last semester was in a transition from Germany to Spain, and obviously was a little overwhelmed with that. So I guess it's a little understandable, or to some extent is understandable, that some of the things he couldn't do on time. But also I believe there was a problem with the design, so we loaded too much on Tim, and it would be unreasonable to expect him to be able and available 24/7, obviously. And so there are some improvement ideas around that. Another area that coaches talked about was communication, and not only communication between the coaches and, for example, Tim or me, but also among other coaches. So basically there was more interest in regular meetings, exchanges of ideas, getting to know each other, things like that. And so again, that's something we can do. And so we started thinking with Tim what we can do to improve it, and then who should do what. And one of the normal, logical steps was, well, let's write down all the tasks that need to be completed, and then simply take a look and see what's the best way to complete those tasks. So who should do it, when and how. And so I started working on that exercise about 2 weeks ago, and I thought it would take me a week, an hour. How long would it take just to write all the things that need to be done? But then it literally took me 2 weeks and probably about 5 hours of work. So 2 weeks, because I couldn't just put in all the hours at once. And I ended up with a list of about 350 or so items. And those are not even a full list, because most of them, or many of them, have to be completed on a regular basis, some every day, some once a week. And so for some of those listings, it just basically said like every month or every day, or like checking some of the emails literally 3 times a day. And so if you count even those as, if you count those as separate tasks, then the full list probably will be closer to like 500 items. And so now that I have all that list, on the one hand, it's a great exercise for myself. I didn't even think that it's so many steps that it involves, to just kind of do them as you go. But on the other hand, it allowed me to better see, first of all, what needs to be done. And second, now we're in a perfect position to take a look and see who should be doing what. And so we can impose strict deadlines. We can literally agree, okay, this, for example, needs to be done by Tim, and this needs to be done by Vas, and maybe this can be done by my assistants. And so we can literally have a more streamlined flow and make sure that things are done, especially when, for example, if either I get, sick or busy with other things, or Tim, then at least we have a plan. People know what they're supposed to do, and some of those things can happen without our involvement. And so I will share the screen here for a second just to show you an idea of what we're dealing with. And I think we don't really have, just a second, we don't really have to go through specific point here. So you see us on the screen a table, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, because I have multiple screens, you never know which one will be shared. So, but the big blocks in this job are, one, recruitment, and for this semester we already did it. Everything from first looking and establishing the eligibility of the people who participated in the past, making sure that only those who did well are applying, invited to apply. Then welcome sessions, welcome activities, things that we already did, like for example, orientation webinar and things like that. There are a couple of things that we still need to do, like for example, I would like to create a closed Facebook group or WhatsApp group. Tim usually does it, and we have one left from the last semester, probably will reuse it. But again, just want to make sure that it's operational. One thing that we were not sure about here is should the coaches be invited to the group and should they start being involved in all those webinars from the start, or only when the practical phase starts. And so the kind of considerations here are, on the one hand, we would like to get them involved as soon as possible for obvious reasons. On the other hand, always in any group, especially in something like this, there would be people who drop out in the middle of the semester. There would be some who sign up, I think it's a good idea, and then disappear. And so we had about 400 applications total, invited about 120 people or 30, something like that, to participate. And as expected, we have about 60 left at this time. So some just never took the tests, some disappeared, some, I don't know what's going on there. but it happens all the time. So people don't realize how much time it is, and that's perfectly normal. So we would like to have about 50, maybe 40 people total. At this time, we have about 60 that do well, so that completed all tests so far, do well. So if all of them stick around, we'll probably do some selection and select the best 50. I will not be surprised if in the remaining week somebody still drops out, and we'll have kind of naturally roughly the group that we need. So, but in any case, the idea is that if we started having all those meetings and stuff, and half of the people don't show up, that may actually send the wrong message to those who do show up. And so one of the ideas for postponing that was wait until we have a nice solid final group and then go full scale. So not sure what's the best way, but those are some of the considerations. Then we have the theory phase, which we are in now. So we have a little over a week left. And so that's where it's a little bit more technical. As I said, other than the webinars, if we want to do them, we can probably start this week. But I think I lean towards waiting until everybody passes, or until we have the list of people who passed the theory training, and then have a nice welcome session for those who did pass, for those who did qualify, and then have those regular meetings. Other than that, I'm preparing the materials for the coaches. We have some left from the last semester, updating some things, sending the links to the materials, to the tests, taking the tests, downloading the data, processing the data, basically assigning the numeric values. And that is more or less mechanical, so it doesn't require too much work. One of the things we thought there was that maybe there are some open-ended questions, and we thought maybe we should look at those open-ended questions more carefully, provide feedback, ask either Tim or head coaches to work with those. But I know how much work it is, and at the same time, it's probably not as critical at this time. So I simply look through those answers. If they look fine, they look fine. We have a lot of quantitative questions where people have write our own answers. The quality on qualitative and quantitative parts of the test are almost identical. So those who answer a lot of multiple choice questions correctly usually also write good answers. So therefore, it seems like it's unnecessary to bother you or Tim with the need to provide feedback and comments. So it's probably unnecessary. But then the real fun starts in about a week, a little bit more, when the final phase of the project, when the theoretical phase is over and the practical phase starts. So that's when it gets really busy. And before I get into that, so far, does it make sense what I'm saying? Is it clear? Any questions, comments? All right, so now let's get then in the fun parts. So basically a week from now, we will have the final list of people. And so there will be several things that need to be done on a regular basis. Some of those are very straightforward, meaning that we know who needs to do them. Very easy, very simple. Some I'm not sure. So some of them, especially when it comes to head coaches, that's where ambiguity is. On the one hand, I would like to load as much work on you as possible, with the hope that, again, it will be useful and interesting for you, but also help for us. At the same time, I feel it would be unreasonable to expect you to do too much. And second, I would not want to ask you to do anything that is not developmental, that is not going to help you in the future jobs. So therefore, I was trying to limit it only to the things that are creative, that are basically coaching. So no clerical work, nothing secretarial, only developmental, mentoring, coaching, managing, resolving conflicts, that kind of stuff. And so let me go through those main blocks quickly that do not raise any questions, and then ask you, and hopefully you'll have some suggestions for those sections where we are not 100% sure. So once the practical phase starts, the coaches will have a weekly survey, so we know what's going on there. I'll prepare those, and it's not a problem, so I guess nobody else has good access to the system anyway. My assistants are not ready to do that. I guess it would be unreasonable to ask you to learn how Qualtrics works, so I'll handle that, no big deal. Then once we send out the surveys, my assistant can take it from there as far as sending out the reminders and downloading the data and packaging and processing the data. She can only take it as far as downloading and preparing a nice readable collection of answers or files, depending on what that week is being asked of the coaches. But then obviously that work has to go either to Tim or to head coaches or both for feedback and evaluation. So that's something my assistants cannot do. So they're still not skilled enough to work with that. So that's one area. So my preference here initially was that Tim does it all. So once we have the weekly survey, he reads the comments, responds to the comments individually, and if there is a need to intervene, he intervenes. That way, I can rely on one person, and that way we have one single point of contact, and there is a person who is fully responsible, and the work will be done. Last semester, we did try to use coaches for some of that and head coaches. And the problem there was that not all coaches and head coaches were equally responsible, let's call it that way. There were some who were wonderful and great, and there were some who sometimes were busy with other things. And so that's where I'm not 100% sure if it would be safe enough to outsource the review of the weekly surveys to the head coaches and then expect them to process everything, or if it's something that still should be processed by Tim. So that would be one question. But before we start the discussion, let me also give you a little bit more of that kind. So we have the weekly surveys, and that's where the coaches simply tell us how they're doing. But then in addition, we have, soon enough, we will have the coaches working on their, as we call it, them portfolios. So the coaches will be working on a text-based training module, a pre-recorded video lecture, a live webinar, and then towards the end, a research reflection paper. And so with the surveys, that shouldn't be a problem. Even if we have 50 coaches, it's not that much work. I assume most of them will just say everything's fine, or if it's in the past they would. And there is really not much that needs to be done, to be done. And if there is a question, it's relatively rare, and I suppose Tim can handle it. But when it comes to the portfolio items, that's where we need feedback. So for each of those 4 things that I mentioned, there would be several kind of waves of preparation. One, the coaches have to think about a topic for the text-based module, for the video lecture, for the webinar, and for the research paper. It can be the same topic for all 4 if they would like to explore it in real depth, but it's possible that some will say, I want to do a webinar on this, and I would like to do a video lecture on something else, and maybe write a paper about something else. And so somebody needs to look at those proposals and basically say, okay, this looks good, go ahead, or maybe this looks promising, but some changes are needed. Why don't you clarify the question a little bit more, or make it more focused, or whatever needs to be said. And so that's where it may actually take some time. So for one, Tim, for example, it may be too much work. So 50 submissions times 4 different items, that's 200 submissions. And so not only it will be a lot of work, but also it may be a good idea to have multiple opinions. So Tim is smart, Tim is great, but at the same time, it's not a fact that his advice would always be exhaustive and perfect. So obviously here it would be beneficial to have head coaches to do some work as well. So first of all, for them, it would be interesting to see what students propose and critique their work and propose better improvements. And second, if we assign, let's say, 2 head coaches to each of those submissions, we will get multiple opinions. So there may be one from Tim, maybe one from 2 head coaches. And so hopefully it will be more useful. And again, it's something that you will work on as managers in the future, both preparing the materials, but also helping others develop them. And so this would be a good opportunity to kind of see how this process works from a managerial point of view. And so that's where I think it would be very, very beneficial to get the head coaches involved. And then next stage would be, so you give them some feedback, they go and develop something, and then bring you not only the idea, but also the draft. So essentially they say, okay, I think this will be the outline of my presentation, or I think this will be, that's what my text-based training module will look like. It's a rough draft, but would you take a look? And then again, you take a look and say, okay, this is good, this may need to be changed, feedback, and so on. Then they go back, again, work some more, and then submit either final version or maybe even one more intermediate step for feedback. And then finally, they submit the final version. Somebody needs to provide feedback. Likewise, if it's a video lecture, then somebody needs to watch it and provide feedback. If it's a live webinar, same thing, somebody needs to attend it and provide feedback or watch the recording. It doesn't mean that you have to read and attend and watch every single second of it, but at least take a look and say, okay, maybe you talk too fast, or maybe you look a little, not confident enough, or whatever the feedback. So somebody needs to provide it. And so that's where I was not 100% sure who needs to do it. As I said, it would be more comfortable and efficient for me if Tim did all of that. At the same time, I probably believe that it would be too much for one person. One. Second, what if Tim gets busy, is sick, or something else? Who's going to do it? That's 2. So we'll prefer to have somebody else. And 3, that's actually a very developmental job. And so I suppose even if Tim could handle it, I think head coaches could be helpful here. I mean, it would be beneficial and helpful for you to be involved in this stage. So what do you think about this portfolio stuff? So what's the best way to manage it?
The best way to manage it?
Well, meaning that, should head coaches be involved, particularly in reviewing the proposal, then the draft, and then the final product, providing feedback? If so, do you think it would be then necessary to have Tim involved at all, or just assign it to head coaches? And then 3, would it be better to have like one head coach per submission? And in that case, if we have, let's say, 5 head coaches and let's say 50 people, each head coach will review 5 of those. Or would it be better to have 2 head coaches assigned to each case, in which case it's like 20 submissions per head coach, but then it's also twice as much feedback back? Or perhaps they will work in a pair and decide among themselves, like, for example, okay, it seems like your feedback is good, I don't really have anything to add this time. Or vice versa, I think this is good, but I think I would like to add my comments. And so kind of let them work out one consolidated response. So what do you think is the best way forward here?
Karina, did you have anything?
Oh, yes. I think that they have already done this work last semester as head coaches. And I think it's totally possible that head coaches can handle everything. But for example, last semester, we had like subgroups. And for example, I had 5 coaches with me. Mm-hmm. So I gave feedback for all their portfolio. Mm-hmm. But I think it would be better this time if, as we don't have these subgroups, for example, I evaluate the outline of student 1 and then the outline of the webinar of student 2, so they can have contact with more head coaches. And I have a point of view and maybe the other head coach has another point of view. So I think this way it would be better for everybody.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to assigning, by the way, coaches to head coaches, let's call it this way. Yeah, I think there is probably no need to have groups per se. So it's equally easy for us to send the assignments, on a more or less random basis. This way you will see more coaches, they will see more head coaches, and we can keep the workload roughly, equal that way. So I suppose there is really no need to have, like these are your 5 coaches. So it can be, these are the submissions that need your evaluation this time, for example. So yeah.
I'm going to play devil's advocate on that just a little bit because me personally, because this is something that progresses and each person is they're going to modify their own reports and they're going to add to them personally, and they're going to take suggestions and things. I think that having one head coach that follows along with each person, or not even just one. I like the idea of having 2 or more head coaches evaluating each person. But that way they see the natural progression, they can see where their feedback is being taken and also what feedback's not being taken. So I think that would be helpful for the head coaches as well as
no doubt that if you start working on a case, let's say somebody's, for example, training module, obviously it would have to be you who then provides the feedback on the next level and the next level. What I meant is that it may not necessarily have to be that we from the very beginning decide that these are 5 people that you work with. We can just whoever gets assigned to you, that's whom you will work with for the rest of the semester, for example, or if the need arises, maybe switch at some point. But yes, continuity is important. What I meant was that it may be that you will be looking at, for example, let's say, for example, text-based modules from these 5 people, but then live webinars that happen to be other people and stuff like that. So I think if you embed that flexibility, it will give us a little bit more even load and adjustment as we progress. But yes, you're absolutely right that it would make sense that if it's a same case, either same proposal for a, let's say, video lecture or a same sort of a, conflict situation that, takes a few weeks, it would obviously make sense to have the same head coach managing this situation. So kind of going one stage to another, and because you're right, you need to know what happened before.
Well, I like your idea about that. Like for the webinar, have you're assigned a certain 5 people, and then for the text-based module, you have a different 5 people. So yeah, no, that totally works. But I mean, so you end up actually getting more than just 5 people. Because
we'll see what the numbers look like. So it's a little hard to say what exactly numbers, will it be 5 or 6 or 7 or 3? So we'll have to see. But yeah, and by the way, it may end up naturally that it will be kind of subgroups in the end anyway. Like if you start working with these people and stay with them, it will kind of feel like a subgroup anyway, perhaps just not as rigid, and you will still have contact with other people, in other venues.
Well, the other thing though that I just have a concern about is because these aren't scheduled really at different due dates, they're all scheduled at the same time at the end. Is that correct?
Well, that's another thing that I wanted to discuss. So the way I kind of scheduled it now, so I put the dates that I thought would make sense. Let me see if I can share it again. So so you see my screen, right?
Yes.
So when we look at the portfolio, right? So we say that we will start telling them about, they need to think about the idea basically from week 1. So once we start the practical phase, we'll tell them, guys, remember that you will have to do the portfolio, text-based training module, video lecture, and so on. And then a little bit later, we would remind them about that. And then at some point, they will send us the initial idea, you review, provide feedback. Then a little later, they send you a draft, and so on and so on and so on. And so this way, it will be, the final due date will be at the end for everything. But the whole idea here is to have it progressing literally from almost day 1, so that it's not, they're not waiting until the last 5 days and then try to prepare everything in the last week. So the idea is that we will have, a reminder goes out, in week 1, then another one a little later. Then by some time they have to submit the proposal, like in week 3, for example. Then by some time they have to, a week later, they have to have a full outline, for example. And then, for example, if it's a webinar, they must do it during this week. So not after the project is over, nobody needs it anymore, but, during some time. Text-based video lecture, I suppose it's okay to record them later, so it will be for the next cohort of students. But so, yes, the idea is that it will be done, basically, they will start working on it and we'll be making some progress from day 1.
Okay.
That's the idea.
Okay.
Yeah, staggering the kind of due dates for the smaller parts of it, I think would be easier on the head coaches as well as Tim and whoever and yourself, so that it minimizes the amount of people who would just wait till the end to do everything.
Yeah, because that's what happened last semester.
Exactly. That's precisely, Karina, what we're trying to avoid this time. The only thing that I did it again, so that those intermediate deadlines are not all at the same time, I thought it would be nice if people started working on the live webinar first. It would be the first one to be kind of due. And the reason for that is because that's where we want students to be involved. And second, that's where we have the most flexibility. Then based on how that goes, they can start thinking about maybe putting whatever they said, learned, questions, answers, start putting that on paper and then working on the text-based module, literally just a few days apart. So it's not like it, but it just so it doesn't happen all at the same time. And then finally the video lecture that may take a little bit more preparation and rehearsals. And so in that case, I suppose it's fine if they go in a different sequence, maybe text-based first and then webinar based on that, for example, and then video lecture. But so far, I was trying to schedule the deadlines in a way that, there is a little gap between those projects. And so even though they will work on all of them roughly at the same time, but there will be no submissions of different things at the same day. So again, I guess the deadlines will be still somewhat tentative. So I suppose some people will move faster. If somebody's a little late, I suppose it's not a huge deal either. But at least we will share those deadlines with the coaches and head coaches, and we'll try to enforce them. I think it will benefit everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So I suppose then, so the big question then, so you think it would be fine to use head coaches for that intermediate feedback, coaching, rehearsals, perhaps, like if it's a webinar, maybe coaches will want to do a rehearsal, maybe ask head coaches to attend or at least watch the rehearsal in recording. So things like that, provide feedback and basically guide them, right? I think it would be something you guys can handle, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Another one is cases, and that's the same thing. So here, so by cases, I mean the following. So we already started getting emails in coaching@xculture.org At this time, we handle it among the professors, but starting next week, we'll have coaches for that. And we would like to have it much more structured this time. So I would like it, so my assistant will review that email account, and if Tim has time, would be nice too. And then as the cases, arrive, as the questions, are submitted, we will be assigning coaches to the cases and then head coaches to the coaches. And the idea is that it will be the following sequence. Email arrives, somebody says, we have a problem in the team, could you help? Within a few hours, my assistant sends that case to one of the coaches, or maybe even two coaches at the same time, again, in case somebody is busy, and says, okay, here is the request for help. Here are the names of all the team members and their contacts, and perhaps even their countries and level of studies. And here are the names of their professors and their contacts, in case it's a conflict, if you need to contact, and talk more about that. At the same time, the system is programmed to send a satisfaction survey to the students 5 days later, and then reminder to the coaches to submit a case report 5 days later. Then if everything goes fine, the coach same day, next day, reaches out to the team, says, I've seen you have a problem here, guys. Can I get more information? Gets more information, and then tries to help them, spends a few days, problem solved. About 5 days after the whole thing started, the students get an email, says, you asked for help. Could you please comment on how the coach did? They submit the survey and comment on the case and say, okay, everything went fine, very helpful, or maybe not. And then at the same time, the coach gets an email saying, could you please submit the case report? Half a page, 1 page at most. Just describe what happened. And the coach says, all right, so this was the situation in team 125. I did talk to other team members and they confirmed the situation. I then maybe talked to the professor to get more information, or we had a meeting. I suggested the solution. That's what they did. That's the situation now. And then we have like a 1-page summary of the case. We have Sophia, I'm on the phone. I can. So my daughter was trying something. So we have a 1-page summary of the case. We have the satisfaction survey from the students, and then all of that goes to you, head coaches. If you haven't been contacted before, it means everything's fine and your help was not needed, and you just review and you say a few words about that maybe to the coach. Or if the coach finds it difficult, he can come to you and say, okay, guys, here's the situation. I think I would like to do this, but I wanted to get your opinion. And again, you say, yeah, I've seen this case before. This is what we maybe should do. And so this way you kind of keep your eye on it. It shouldn't take you more than a few minutes to review that material and provide some sort of feedback. But at the same time, the coach knows that somebody will look at it and will provide like an external opinion. At the same time, you learn something, see how people solve those cases, and so on and so on and so on. So, and then in the end, we have a nice stack of case reports in one folder that perhaps we can even use for training purposes next semester. So hopefully soon enough, we'll have a sizable database and we'll know these are the types of the requests we get. These are the ways they've been handled in the past. Maybe even this is what we know works and this is what we know doesn't work. And then maybe even sometime later, we will develop some standard manuals for how to handle each type of cases based on our experience. So would that, does that procedure sound reasonable, plausible to you?
Yes, it does. I remember from last semester, the concern that I had wasn't so much that when the students reach out, it was when the coaches reached out with that they read the comments of the students and they thought that there was an issue that needed to be addressed. I personally had done that once and was asked how I would handle it, and I answered, and then I got nothing after that.
That is a whole next block. So the comments, so we have requests for help in two forms. One, that's when the email literally comes into coaching@xculture.org and they specifically say, we need coaching help. Those are relatively easy because they specifically ask for help. And so that's relatively easy to approach. Well, you guys told us you needed help. Here I am. How can I help? Give me more information. The whole different block is the comments. And that's something that I do have questions about. Let's finish this one first and then go to the comments.
Sorry.
When they ask by email for help, like specifically, explicitly. So does that sound fine? So my assistant assigns a coach or maybe even two coaches. They investigate, help as much as possible. We do a satisfaction survey of the students. We ask for a case report from the coaches. All of that goes to the head coaches for the review and maybe some comments and feedback to the coach. And maybe we'll even discuss it a little bit more in the weekly webinars when the time comes. Is that kind of a reasonable process?
That does sound good. I'm curious, on last semester, how many coaches were assigned cases?
Well, that's one of the problems, and that's why I would like to ask my assistants to handle that, and maybe Tim as well. So we had probably about 2 requests for help per day, especially towards the end of the semester. There were more. So there were probably not that many, maybe 2 or 3 a week in the first weeks, then probably 1 or 2 a day in the middle. And then towards the end, there were actually more. There were like 2, 3 a day, and sometimes even 4 a day. The problem that I have with that is that we even had some unanswered cases. So as I said, we loaded all of that on Tim. He was busy transferring new program, new studies, new country. And so there were complaints from the students who said, I sent even sometimes multiple requests for help and nobody reached out to me, nothing happened. And then I did go and check that email address myself. And at least on the last day of the semester, there were about 25 unanswered requests for help. So as I said, I'm not sure if we should sort of blame Tim, or I'm leaning towards, it is too much for one person, especially somebody who's busy with other things. And so what I would like to do this time is I have 2 graduate students who work with me here plus Tim, and I would like to ask them each to check that email once a day. 5 minutes, just check if there is something, just, go to the table. You have the list of, let's say, 30, 40, 50 coaches. Just see who doesn't have any assignment at this time. We can keep track there. And just say, okay, I see, for example, I don't know, John Smith is free now, or, next in line for a case. So John, here is the case, work on this. And so if we have 3 people, if I ask one of my assistants to check it every morning, another one to check it every afternoon, and Tim, whenever he has time, for us, it would be our deep night. That means that somebody checks that email account roughly every 8 hours, which means that whatever comes in probably will be answered within hours, not days. And so from that perspective, I'm hoping it will be a more prompt response. And we do have quite a few of those. As I said, we do have up to several a day towards the end of the semester. So if we give especially 2 coaches to each case, it looks like each coach will probably end up handling about a dozen of those over the course of semester, and maybe more. So we'll see how busy it will get, especially if we remind the students each week that they have that option. Last semester, I didn't do it as actively. So on the one hand, fearing that we don't have enough manpower to handle it. On the other hand, just simply kind of didn't occur to me. But now I think we can actually, battle that theme and remind students, if any problems occur, if you would like to get some feedback, if you have a difficult situation, here is an email you can contact for help, and help will be provided. And so hopefully this way it will keep both coaches busier, but also will help students. So, but now we're getting into more interesting stuff. So the weekly comments. As we discussed, I would like to coaches to read weekly comments. One, because it's useful. It's basically your opportunity to see, I don't want to call them diaries. Diary sounds personal. It's more like professional journals. So again, some of the students don't comment at all. Some would just say a couple of words saying like everything's fine, but some are actually quite informative, detailed comments. And by simply reading those comments, the coaches will have a good opportunity to know what's going on in the teams. But also, not all students are comfortable asking for help explicitly, sending an email and saying, I need help. But they may mention about the problems where they may need help in the comments. And the idea is that somebody needs to review those comments specifically for, signs of trouble. And if signs of trouble are identified, then somebody needs to reach out to the team and say, I was reading your comments. Thank you so much for providing them. And I see that there is a problem like this. Would you like some help? And so unlike in the case where they request help, we say, you asked for help, here I am to help. Here it probably will be a little softer. It will be more, I read your comments. Thank you for providing them. Yes, as you said, I see that there is a problem. Would you like some help with that? And maybe somebody will say, no, I'm fine, no need. But somebody will say, sure, yes, why don't you help me? And so the question I have here is, who should be reading those comments to identify the problems? The reason I don't like the idea of asking coaches to do that is because it will take a lot of time. First of all, students leave comments, let's say on Thursday. We download the data on Monday. Coaches get it Monday night, for example. By the time they read it, by the time they provide the comments back, it will be like end of the week. So which means that it will be like 10 days since the comment was left. It may not even be relevant anymore. So asking my assistants to do it is probably going to be more streamlined, faster. So I can literally ask Lark and Arzu to read it on Monday morning. So like download the data and right there, just read them. Anything you see that is problematic, send an automatic template message saying, thank you for comments. I saw there is a problem. Would you like some help? And then if the coach, if the person responds and says, yes, I would like some help, basically handle it the same way as a request for help. So assign a coach. The problem with that is that in the late track, we will have, Bruno, my dog wants to go and play with the kids outside. The problem with that is that if we have about 3,000 to 4,000 people in the late track, it may be just too much text for one or even two people. So I'd like maybe even Tim to do it. But again, even if only half of them say something, and even if of that half, only half is actually something that may, be of substance, that's like 1,000 comments that are of substance and 4,000 people total. And so just the sheer volume makes me a little, I prefer that it's one assigned person or two assigned people. We don't have to worry about the group, doing it, but it just may be too much. And so we have here a progressive level, number of people. So it can be just my assistants, or first it can be just Tim. Then it can be Tim and my assistants. Then it be Tim, my assistants, and head coaches. And then it can be Tim, my assistants, head coaches, and all the coaches. And so I'm not sure where it should stop, or it should be, like a very, very quick review by the assistants just for the obvious problems. Then maybe by Tim also, like something that strikes you right away. But then perhaps ask the coaches to read it, for general purposes, like for educational purposes. But as you read this, if you spot something, if we missed it, we will then process that as well. So maybe do it that way. So I don't know, what's your take here? What would you recommend?
This is a good problem.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. And I think that, having Tim and having your assistants look through everything, while yes, they can do it faster because they have immediate access.
Well, the good thing is that it's not only they have immediate access, Tim is sort of, fully involved, and my assistants are paid, for the time. And so
right.
We can tell them. So it's like with the coaches and head coaches, I cannot tell you guys, you must do it. First of all, you're basically volunteers here, meaning that you're doing me a favor. So I can't just tell you, you must do it. And second, you have other things going on. These guys, they specifically, at least my assistants, they owe me 20 hours a week, each of them. And so we have to use up those hours. And that's something I can tell, okay, that's one of their jobs, and they will do it. So
I think having them do an initial look through, and then telling the head coaches, hey, as you're reading these, and the coaches too, as you're reading these, see if there's anything that you spot that maybe they missed. Right. So it's kind of like a backup. And this may be kind of a really weird out there, and I don't know if it would work idea, but is there a way to create an algorithm or something, like a computer code or something that would spot certain keywords or something?
Yes, we can do that. In fact, that's exactly what I do with my own students. So once Arzu prepares a table with the comments, and am I sharing the screen? Yeah, let me share the screen with you. So Arzu already is preparing the comments. So if we go to, for example, this semester we have weekly comments, right? Mm-hmm. Open one of them, so that's early track. That's what the comments look like. So we have team, we have name, we have instructor, we have comments. As you see, it's only like the beginning of the project, so not many people leave comments, but some do, and some of them like so far so great, but some say a little bit more. Like for example, however, there is one individual on the team that is not really contributed to the project. Okay, that's something that maybe coaches need to intervene. And so what we can do is we can literally do conditional formatting here and have a list of keywords that will highlight, like for example, let's say, highlight the rules when it contains, let's say, for example, problem, right? So if there is a problem word in there anywhere, it will highlight it. And so let's see if we have any of those. Actually, we don't. Oh, no, there is one. So it comes up right away. There is a word problem, and it's actually a more sizable comment. So maybe that's what my assistant can read more carefully. Likewise, we can go and have other words that we think may be indicative of a problem. Highlight that contain a word, for example, not doing much, or not, or not in general. So. Well, I guess in this case, not much coordination between but I think we soon learn how to manage it. Well, potentially, again, something that, I read your comments and I saw that you have problems with coordination. Would you like some help?
Sure.
So not is probably too strong a word. It will highlight too many things. Oh, yeah, but yeah, actually not bad. The communication has been slow. Not everybody answers. Again, maybe that's something that coach should, investigate and perhaps try to help them. And so, yes, we can do it this way. In fact, when the comments go out to you guys, we can already have those words highlighted, or at least highlighted for my assistant, and she will read only those that actually kind of come up right away as potential suspects. So definitely doable. It's not a very sophisticated algorithm or methodology, but probably will do the job done.
Fast.
Yes.
I work in the compliance area, and my area handles the confidential channel. Where, for example, if there's a client or if there's an employee that wants to complain about something, they go there and send an email or calls these hotline.
So you're saying that we should create something confidential in case they want to say it without mentioning who that is?
No, actually, so my area handles this, and I can ask them, because it's my area, but I don't work specifically with this, but I can ask my colleagues how they treat the cases, because sometimes there is a client that wants to say, I bought something, but I really wanted that thing that comes with it, like a present, a gift.
Right.
So it's not a complaint, actually. They're just asking for something. And they have this filter where they see what needs attention and what doesn't, or what needs an answer, what not. And I can ask them how they filter all this information and how they treat this.
Yeah. Any advice here would be much appreciated. And at the same time, by the way, guys, if you can come up with something, I mean, obviously, probably there are algorithms, developed by other companies that work well. But I mean, it doesn't mean that we cannot develop something of our own, which may even be better. So as we start working on that, if you have some suggestions, if you have some, suggestions for the keywords for the assignments, that's precisely, why we sort of, have you here, so that, you can try to implement it. So that's a very good idea.
Sure.
One thing that you said, though, confidential, do you think we should provide also a channel for kind of confidential complaints? Like we can have a survey that is fully confidential, just in case somebody wants to share something but doesn't want to be known. Would that be helpful? Aren't
these surveys confidential?
Well, the weekly surveys, no, because we need to know who did them. So, if they send it, if they send it by email, we know whom it came from. If we look at the weekly surveys, then obviously, because peer evaluations are part of it, because we need to know who does what, they must be, we must know who did it. But so maybe we should also allow them, like, have a survey that does not track a name, and that one specifically for asking for help, and literally like click and describe or complain or blow the whistle without us knowing who that is, just so we know.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to think of the logistics of that, because they're going to have to report who the team is that's having the problem, and so it's going to narrow it down anyway.
Right. That's a fair comment. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking like that it's not going to give the confidentiality, give as much confidentiality.
Unless it's something maybe they want to complain about us not doing our job well. It's not about a team. It's more like, guys, it's unacceptable. I don't want to tell you who I am, but like for example, whatever I assume there will be enough things that we may not be doing perfectly, and I suppose it would be helpful for us to know, even if we don't know who said it. Maybe I'll set that up
might be good. Do one at the end of the program.
Yeah, that's true too. Well, maybe I'll set up that channel. As I said, it doesn't take much time to set up. Maybe nobody will ever use it, but who knows? Maybe something useful will come through it. It's better to be criticized and do something about it than not even know that there is a problem and not do anything about it.
Right.
It may not feel good. Yeah.
The other thought that I just had was right before they do in the Qualtrics questionnaire, is there a way to have a like a 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 about their satisfaction with the team and things like that, and then that way we could filter?
Yeah, we have that, and we do ask that, so we have
right.
That. So
maybe what we do is search those first for issues.
Yeah, maybe, as I said, we do have that information. We never shared with the coaches, but I suppose probably we should or could at least. And maybe especially when a case is assigned, I suppose we can at least give coaches access to that bit of information so they can look at all the peer evaluations for this team for the last few weeks, and all the comments for this team for the last few weeks. So this way you can investigate before you even talk to them. You can get a kind of better sort of dossier, let's call it this way, on the team to see what's going on. Because sometimes what happens, for example, you get an email. In fact, that's a very, very common occurrence. In fact, probably half of all the cases, just like the one I showed you now. So there is somebody on my team who is not working, or nobody on my team is working. I'm the only one. Everybody is basically not doing anything. And then you look at the peer evaluations, you look at the comments, every single one of them completes the weekly surveys. Everybody gives everybody high peer evaluations. And it actually looks like the student alone is not really participating. So maybe that's why. And so in that case, it may mean the student is just, self-promotion, or it could be that the student somehow got left out and thinks that nothing's happening, whereas the team basically doesn't communicate with him or her. And so in that case, obviously, some coaching would be needed, just, help the team, kind of reintegrate together so that they work together. I don't know. So, but yes, in that case, it may be useful to provide that background information so that the coaches know a little bit more. It shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, and I like the idea of being able to see the week from week, because we couldn't really do that unless we saved the files, because we were assigned a certain group of teams within our smaller team. And
yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. In fact, as I said, we can easily give access coaches to all that information. We share it with professors anyway, so why not show it to the coaches too? So it shouldn't be a problem. All right, so got that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just minimize some of it, because some of the data is too much and some of it is
right. So as I said, we can ask the assistants to send, when they assign a case to the coach, send the names of these team members, of the members of this team, their professors, and maybe, specifically an extract of the comments and peer evaluations for this particular team. So this way they will get, like a selected, chunk of information specifically on this case. So,
cool.
All right. One last question. Don't want to take much of your time. Webinars. So we would like to have webinars, both for the students, but those are a little different, but also for the coaches. And so ideally, I'd like to have one every week, and obviously not every coach will be attending every one every week. In fact, it's probably not even necessary, but we'd like to have at least one every week so that the coaches can attend them. If you cannot do it this week, do it next week, maybe, so that you have one at least every other, maybe every 3 weeks. And so the question is, who should be running those webinars? And here I think it would be both necessary, but also educational to outsource it to the head coaches. One, because it's just too much, to expect him to do them every single week. Second, we would like a variety of opinions, of types of leadership styles when it comes to leading those webinars. And I think that could be, an interesting opportunity for you guys. You can share some things that you observed in the last week. You can hear what coaches are talking about. So I think it would be useful for you to participate for sure, but perhaps also organize and manage them. And so the question is, would it be reasonable to ask the head coaches, maybe also again in pairs, to, let's say, organize one of those webinars, I don't know, let's say every 3 weeks, for example. So if we assign it that you do one every 3 weeks and a total of, let's say, 2 over the course of the semester, or maybe 3. This way, it's probably not too much work for you for the whole semester, and at the same time, we'll know that, So would that be something that head coaches can handle? We can give you either create the, you just tell us the time we create the webinars in the Zoom and send you the link so you can, start it as a host, or we can literally give you the login information for our Zoom. You can create the webinar yourself, design the page whichever way you want it to be designed, put the topics there, speakers if you invite anyone. Probably not necessary to have speakers, but maybe you'll decide at some point, who knows. And then basically, you go online when the time comes, you're recorded, so it's nothing difficult here. So the question is, would it be reasonable to ask the head coaches to run the roundtable coach webinars? Like, let's say, I don't know, twice during the 2-month period.
How many head coaches are there?
We have, I believe, 6 total, but let me check just 1 second. And again, you never know how it's going to work, because we have some who are clearly, more. So we have 6 head coaches plus Tim plus me. So there are like 8 people managing it, but there are 6 of you plus Tim. And I know all of them, so all seem to be reliable. But again, we'll not be surprised if at least one of them will drop out. Again, Daisy got a new job, sick, who knows what can happen. So it may be, let's say, 5 that we can definitely count on, but 6 actually on the roster.
I think it will be interesting. For example, I'm already talking to one coach that he's Brazilian. So he asked me how was the symposium, how things work.
Yeah.
I think it's nice that we can share our experience with them in this roundtables.
Okay. Well, as I said, I may ask you then to organize one of those, basically lead. Maybe we'll do the first one all together, or maybe Tim or I will do them. But then, after the first week or two, I think you guys will be fully ready. And as I said, the idea there is literally just, meet each other, ask what cases did you guys work on last week? What did you encounter? How did it go? What did you see in the comments? Basically just sharing experiences. Doesn't have to be a whole hour, can be less if it's fewer people, or, maybe even longer if it goes well and everybody just wants, to keep talking. And so, as I said, those can be either no topic at all, can be just simply if everybody shows up and talk about whatever, we want to talk about at the moment, or it can be themed. Maybe, one of those you decide to organize, let's say in week 5, specifically on, dealing with complaints. And the kind of introduction could be, okay, guys, by now you all had several cases. By now you all have seen some complaints. So tell us how you handled them, and let me tell you from my more experience to advise how I would handle it. Or perhaps towards the end, there will be questions about plagiarism. There will be questions about free writing. So maybe we can do one of those roundtables specific on plagiarism, where head coaches will tell coaches a little bit more about what plagiarism is, what it's not, how to deal with this. So when the teams ask them, they know what to say. So it can be more like a training session rather than a roundtable session. Or even, as I said, if you find somebody who's an interesting speaker and you think coaches can benefit from talking to this person, maybe you can even organize one like that, maybe one of your professors, or maybe your boss, or maybe, I'm not sure if it's necessary, but if we found someone and you wanted to organize it for the coaches, why not? So whatever you think would be appropriate for that week that you're assigned, as I said, can be completely unscripted, or can be more like a scripted training session, or something in between.
Well, I think a doodle needs to be sent out with each week listed, right, and that way people can sign up. Then we can see if there's some week that people aren't signed up for versus a week that a lot of people want to use,
Yeah, that's true too. We can even ask, all coaches to provide the information. As I said, one challenge here is, finding the time. I thought if, let's say, head coaches or whoever is responsible, if they just simply tell the time that works for them, I think this would be best, because with a group of 50, it would be impossible to find, perfect times for everyone. But let's say, for example, Karina here wants to do a webinar, and she says, I'm available on, Sunday, 10 a.m., 3 weeks from now. And so we just inform everybody that Karina will be organizing a webinar, and if she has a topic, then that's the topic. If it's simply a roundtable, that's a roundtable, and then whoever's available at that time just shows up. We can make it mandatory for the coaches to attend at least, let's say, one every 3 weeks. So because we had this kind of paradox last semester where on the one hand, everybody was saying that we want more of it, but at the same time, when we actually organized a few of those, not many people showed up. And so that's kind of strange, but at the same time, we can make it kind of semi-mandatory. And so this way it will not be, you prepare and nobody shows up, but at the same time, it will be still flexible enough that they don't feel like they must attend every single one.
Right. Maybe we can set up.
Go ahead.
Maybe we can set a poll on the Facebook group, asking them what they want to talk about.
That's true. Yeah, that's even better. Yeah, absolutely. If you can have a little.
Sometimes it's more interesting. For example, if I want to talk about plagiarism, if I'm a coach and I want to listen about plagiarism, I can see which day we are going to talk about this, and we can use the time also to talk about our experience.
Yeah. No, that's true. One question I have here, and that's most important, and please answer honestly. Would it be too much to ask, or would it be a good idea if we ask the head coaches to specialize in different things? Like, for example, let's say, for example, Casey says, you know what, I actually want to manage those webinars. And so she takes on this whole thing, meaning that it doesn't mean that she has to run them all, but it means that she would then decide, okay, it seems like we need a doodle for the time. It seems like we need a discussion in the group for the topics. And so she basically manages it, assigns people who are running those webinars, decides on the dates with them, and so basically is responsible, is a manager of, for example, this specific, let's call it a function or a theme or whatever you want to call it, department. And as I said, it still would be run by different people participate, present, attend, but somebody is basically a director of webinars, for example. And then maybe somebody else is responsible for, I don't know, let's say, for example, cataloging the cases and reviewing them and assigning them and stuff like that. Again, I don't know, it may be a little bit too much to ask because it can be a little, hefty workload. But at the same time, it might require or might allow for some specialization. And so may, basically put a specific task in capable hands of a specific one person who will handle it from the beginning till the end and kind of manage it and essentially, will be a director of the specific direction.
Sure.
Would that be a reasonable, approach, or it's too much and it's better to handle it by, my assistants and myself and Tim?
No, I think it's a cool idea. Is there enough time to implement that though?
Well, so I can literally, just send a list of things that need to be done and ask you guys, any of you are interested in taking on this particular task.
Yep.
So things that come to mind. Well, one, the webinars for the coaches, like roundtable and training. Next one can be a completely different person, webinars with the companies. At this time, I handle it, but if I could find a head coach who says, yes, I can definitely run a webinar, ask questions and stuff, I would be so happy to outsource that, that's not a problem. Then, for example, issues related to weekly comments. Again, if somebody can say, okay, I can handle it, so just give me the right to assign those comments to, to the people so that they read it, assemble it. Like basically, I can provide you my assistants as assistants, but somebody needs to do the planning, and then somebody needs to basically manage it and keep the whole thing in the head. So there will be people who will be basically reporting to you and doing the legwork, but we need the brain center. So that would be, again, another one.
I think it's a great idea.
So
I think you should email and ask people if they're interested in specializing.
Let me do that there. Yeah, let's see how it goes. I mean, if any of you will sign up and do some, take responsibility, take charge of this whole direction, it would be wonderful. But at the same time, if there are either some functions that will remain unclaimed, in that case, I'll just handle it either myself, or we'll talk to Tim or assign my assistants, or we'll find a way to do it otherwise. But it seems to me some of them are autonomous enough, and you guys seem to be, skilled enough to handle something like this. So it would be a good experience for you, something that will look good on resume, and one less thing to keep in mind for me. So if we know that, for example, one of you is responsible for those seminars, I'll just give you the login information. You can schedule them. You can change the dates if you need. You can invite people. So I know that it's something that I don't have to constantly remember in my, in my own head. So. All right, well, I guess that's pretty much all. So I don't know, anything else? I'll just update the table based on what we've discussed. Hopefully the deadlines make sense. I will ask you if you want to take on any of the, bigger tasks. And I think, if everything goes fine, if we finalize everything this week, then we should be ready for Monday for the start of the practical phase, and basically we'll be ready to roll from that point on. So.
On the table, you had several question marks. Are those things that you're thinking that the head coaches could
Yes,
do?
That's usually where I wasn't sure if it should be Tim, if it should be head coaches, or if it should be my assistants. As I said, we have here a dilemma, and I'll be honest, and I hope Tim will be watching this. As I said, on the one hand, my strong preference would be that Tim manages all, meaning that I have only one person to kind of deal with, and he has it all under control, and everything goes great, and I don't have to, to deal with, a dozen people and remember who's responsible for what. At the same time, we tried it sort of last semester, and it worked semi-successfully. And again, I'm not sure if that's because it was a bad design, or if it was because Tim was moving from one country to another, or it's because it's just simply not reasonable to expect one person to be able to handle all of that. And so at the same time, I see that Tim is willing and wants to take on more responsibilities. So I appreciate that. At the same time, I'm almost afraid to assign too much to him because first, as I said, it may be unethical just to ask somebody to do so much. And second, because he may literally run out of time and not be able to do all of this. And so that's why I was trying to outsource as much as possible to my paid assistants, just because we have them and we can. But at the same time, I have a feeling that when I assign too much to my assistants, Tim feels like I'm taking away from, from his plate. And again, my interest here is to help him. But it seems like sometimes he gets upset feeling that I'm not trusting him enough. And at the same time, the same thing with the head coaches. Again, if not Tim, or if it's too much for Tim, my second preference would be head coaches. Load as much as possible, use as much help as possible from them. But again, at the same time, there is a limit as to how much we can ask of you. And then you also have other, things that you have to worry about in your lives. So there is a limit as to how much, would be right to ask. But at the same time, I don't know. I mean, it seems like at least some of you are willing, and would be happy to do a little bit more for experience, for fun. So I don't know where to draw that line. And so that's why I wasn't sure. When in doubt, I was normally just saying my assistant, because that's somebody I know he's here or she's here. I know I can ask them. I know they can do it. But then again, at the same time, that may lead to the point where you will have not much to do, and that's not good. Tim may feel like I'm undermining him, and that's not good. And so that's why I wasn't sure. So I almost wanted to put question marks, and if somebody says I can do it from your team, from the head coaches or Tim, great. I mean, fine by me, no problem at all. But at the same time, if nobody says, or people say, you know what, it's too much work and I would prefer to do that, but not this, then I'll just leave it to my assistants. And so that's why I wasn't sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. So let me go through those question marks one more time and maybe just send that list to all of you. And then, let Tim maybe choose first. If he says, okay, I will do this, 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 unless he says I will do everything, in that case, I will not believe him just because it's too much work. But then if any of you guys say, okay, I think I would like to do this, or I would like to do that, we will then basically go with that. And then I will give you the contacts of my assistants, and they will literally serve as they basically serve as my assistants and can report to you on those tasks. And so we'll know that you have them for so many hours a week. And you can literally just tell them, and in fact demand, because they are hired specifically to do it. So unlike you, out of goodness of your heart, you're helping here, they are literally hired and being paid to do it, and by the university. So you definitely can treat them as your personal or shared assistants, whatever the proper word. And so in that case, hopefully with their assistance and your brains, hopefully it will be possible to manage it right. So. All right, so let's stop here. Let's see how it goes. I'll send something by the end of the day. I hope by Monday the latest, and we'll see who signs up for what, and then finalize this workflow. And then I guess we'll have to adjust it a few times during the semester, but hopefully we'll have a general understanding from the beginning.
Yeah, you can stop the recording, and then I'll...
All right, so let me stop the recording, and then we'll say what we really think about this.